It's great to welcome back to the program our old friend Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine, contributor to RealClearPolitics, and an ardent follower of the ins and outs of election years in particular. Although you're not just an election year guy; you're in year out. But things do
I,
get
I,
more interesting in
I
election
have
years.
I have many gears, David.
Yes, of course. So, I mean, listen, to start with, what is the trajectory for the next 5.5 months? It's like, is this election going to happen in person? Is it going to be vote by mail? Will it depend on state by state? People are talking about Trump will try to delay it, but he will fail. I just have no idea how to even think of the next 5.5 months.
Well, I think he can't delay it. He doesn't have the power to delay it. Congress would never agree to delay it. That won't happen. To the extent we're voting by mail, probably going to be pretty patchwork, state by state. Some states will do a better job and get ahead of the curve. Some states will drag their feet, and what that means at the end of the day is hard to project. And as far as to what extent this whole pandemic's going to matter, it's obviously a big wild card. But consider this: we are in May. We've already had in 2020 an impeachment, a ongoing pandemic and economic collapse, and a sexual assault allegation at the Democratic nominee presumptive, as well, not to mention, of course, the past allegations to the incumbent president. And the numbers haven't moved very much. Biden has had a fairly stable lead in the Real Clear Politics average, generally between 5 and 7. Now, just on this past Friday, it had ticked down to 4.4. That might be a little statistical noise. Or it could be, hey, 2 weeks of Tara Reid coverage has, brought him down a little bit. But you go back to the fall, to September of 2019, Biden has never been below 4 in his average lead in RCP. And that is different than Hillary Clinton. People keep saying, oh, Hillary was ahead in the polls, so is Biden. You can't trust that. And look, things can change. I'm not saying Biden's a lock, but their numbers are different. Hillary had dipped several times, going below 4 into a near tie or an actual tie, a couple of times even slightly behind between September 2015 and Election Day. And in May of 2016, she had a big dip. Some people were saying Biden was worse than Hillary in April. Yeah, Hillary was peaking in April. April was when seemed like she was putting Bernie away, and there was some buyer's remorse on Trump, and Cruz was winning some primaries. May was when Trump locked it down. Bernie's still dogging Hillary, and the FBI investigation on the email servers was really cranking up, and she went from around 9 points to a tie by the end of the month. Now she bounced back up. She was volatile. She was bouncing up and down, not like every week, but some. Biden has not done that much at all. He had a narrowing with Burisma at the turn of the year, which got him down to 4, moved back up into 5 and 7. Now he's a little closer to 4 as of today, but it's not like Tara Reid is becoming, omnipresent in the media. So I wouldn't think that would keep falling the way Hillary did with the email server investigation.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Tara Reid thing in a moment. Now, one of the things in 2016, you hear this talking point, the polls were just wrong. Now, I think it's important when we look at that to say, in terms of the popular vote, the polls were essentially correct. Of course, we have an electoral college system, and you can find 3 states where about 75,000 votes push the electoral college over to Trump. That to me seems, I mean, I know there's these hypotheticals where you could win the electoral college with 27% of the popular vote. We've never seen that, and it would have to be a crazy situation. In practice, is 3 points of popular vote difference roughly the most that could still see the electoral college go the other way? And to put it a different way, if Biden wins the popular vote by 5, wouldn't it be incredibly, like 1 in a million, that he would lose the electoral college?
I mean, some of our better data journalists, like Dave Wasserman, like Nate Cohn, earlier, if it was earlier this year or late last year, were making the case that Trump could win by 5 points. Trump could lose popular vote by 5 points or more.
Yes.
And still win the Electoral College. There are ways that can happen based on how the demographics play out. However, those projections were made before we saw Biden's demographics. Biden's demographics are not Hillary's demographics. Biden does better, much better with seniors than Hillary did and Obama did. You look at Hillary and Obama's numbers generationally, it's a diagonal line downward. The older you get, the less Democratic you are. Biden's kind of a V. Biden gets kind of soft around middle age, around Gen X and early boomers, and then he comes back up with 65 and over. And so that may make a difference in states with senior populations like Florida, like Arizona. So, and what we see today, at least, when we see Biden, around 4 to 7 in most polls. Monmouth was 9. That was kind of high end. CNBC was 3. There was one tie, which was the Investors Business Daily, but generally 5 to 7. State polls in this same period, very good for Biden. Winning in Florida, winning in Arizona, winning in the industrial Midwest. There's even one where he was even up in Texas, so another one was a tie.
Yeah.
So it's not a lock. These are not like massive leads that can't evaporate based on circumstances in the future, but you are seeing Biden doing well in the swing states while winning in the popular vote by around 5 or so.
So, Tara Reid, my sense of this situation is there cannot possibly be what we would call a conclusive investigation into the allegations. I'm going to talk more about this on the program tomorrow, but to not do my segment tomorrow now, the gist of it is you've got a he said, she said situation. The complaint that Tara Reid says she filed but doesn't mention sexual assault, she doesn't have a copy of, and it's not clear what the date is. So I guess what I'm saying is, without criticizing or even evaluating the truth of the claims, there's not enough to conclusively determine what happened, and thus something. I don't know what that something is. I just think there's a lot of people wanting something conclusive, which they're never going to get. What's your sense of it?
Well, I won't put myself in the position of being the adjudicator of what's true and what's not true.
Of course, right. That's the thing. I don't think we're going to be able to.
Let me just try to talk about this in the terms of, I think, the reaction amongst Democrats,
yes,
and the reaction in the media.
Okay.
Biden gave a response a week plus ago that went over well with elected Democrats. You did not see any elected Democrats criticize him. You didn't see anyone say, take me out of the running for VP. You didn't see the endorsements stop coming. You saw Democrats repeat his messages. He gave a statement which other Democrats felt comfortable echoing. And Democrats don't always do that. So
right.
that's a significant thing. So number one, he kept his party in line with that. Number two, I think Tara Reid has made some PR mistakes. Again, this is not a bear on whether it's true or not.
Right.
You could be telling the truth and make PR mistakes. But I think it was a mistake to not respond to Biden quickly. She canceled on Fox, she canceled on CNN. So that created like a 3-4 day period where some media coverage were poking holes in the story and she wasn't responding. And even though this might have gotten wide pickup, the Vox recounting of what Tara Reid said, there are actually two. There was an AP story and a Vox story that got into what she said in 2019 to reporters that wasn't published at the time, and contrasting that with what was said today, and not just her, but also one of her anonymous corroborators. And the 2019 substance and tone was not sexual. What, I wasn't scared by him. He wasn't going to take me in a room. Wasn't that kind of vibe. The friend said that he never kissed her. It just has a totally different tone and context to what was being said today. And clearly that's had resonance in media circles as well as Democratic circles, where they're not as inclined to take what Tara Reid is saying at straight face value without adding in these mitigating elements. So when she finally does Megyn Kelly, a decision to do kind of a big name, but not on a TV platform, on an online platform. You didn't see, like, if she did a CNN exclusive, that gets looped on CNN all day long.
Yep.
Whatever you think of the veracity of it, it's going to get repeated and repeated and repeated. You debate it, you discuss it. That didn't happen with Megyn Kelly. So all the stuff about Biden's side of the story and the questions of Tara Reade's story, that had time to settle. And that did not get reversed by the Megyn Kelly interview.
Is your sense that in 6 weeks, this will be a bigger part of the race or a smaller part of the race?
It's going to be, I think, largely a non-factor unless another shoe drops. I mean,
Right.
Who could have known that she had a neighbor that she spoke to in 1996, come out of nowhere? Something like that happens. Sure, things could change. But of course, someone accuses him of making a verbal sexual harassment to a 14-year-old and it's debunked in 24 hours. So what comes out of the woodwork and does it hold up to scrutiny? Those are things that are going to matter whether this keeps going. Now, I could see, regardless of what happens going forward, Donald Trump doing social media stuff, targeting younger people, targeting women, trying to plant seeds of doubt, semi under the radar, and see if you can hurt Biden on the margins. He did that stuff with Hillary, very successfully, but that was a close race. That stuff works in a close race. If it's not a close race, I don't think that stuff matters.
So before the pandemic really got going, I had kind of a sense that in large part, November would be a lot about the perception of the state of the economy. That's not any particularly unique insight. It would just be that as it often is. And that's what made me think that, polling aside, it was going to be very, very difficult to remove Donald Trump in November. With the completely failed handling of the pandemic, I started to think maybe this is going to affect the trajectory. Now, political scientist Rachel Bitecofer a couple of weeks ago said she doesn't really think that that's going to make a difference. And I want to try to parse through the idea of maybe the handling of the pandemic itself is baked in the sense that Trump's followers think he's doing fine with it and a whole bunch of other people don't believe that he's handled it well, but that's not necessarily going to change too many votes. But isn't that directly linked to the economy at this point, in the sense that isn't the perception of the economy in October and November going to relate directly to what happens with the virus?
Sure. I like Rachel Bitecofer a lot. She's been a source of my pieces. I think she's great. I generally agree in a more of a political science view than perhaps a campaign operative view. A political science view is generally look at the fundamentals. The stuff that campaigns do tends to not have that much of an impact at the end of the day, at best on the margins. I generally subscribe to that. But this is a bit of uncharted territory. For example, a political scientist might say second quarter GDP is highly determinative of the outcome. If you're on the rise, people feel good about the economy. GDP numbers tend to kind of filter through over time. So how it feels on the ground, you don't feel it right away. So what happens in the second quarter, you'll feel by election day. And that's why that tends to have a correlation. And so if you're on a downward trend in the second quarter, even if things are statistically picking up by November, you don't feel it yet, like George Bush in 1992. And so that doesn't help you.
Let me explore that just briefly, because the timing, so people understand. Second quarter is April, May, June. It typically takes about 35 days to get the numbers. So we would know around August 5th or 10th, I think, what the second quarter GDP numbers were. If they are indeed minus 20, as some are predicting, you're talking about a period starting in mid-August, which is actually much closer to the election than the second quarter itself.
Right. It would seem highly likely that second quarter GDP will be disastrous.
Yeah.
And so you might punch that into a model and say it's a done deal. Where I would pause is say this is a little different than your usual recession or depression.
Yes.
Maybe the virus lifts by September and people start shopping more robustly in October. And even though the statistics haven't caught up to that, you're feeling better. and your opinion of Trump is better. Now, I'm not saying I think that's a high probability scenario. I think it's much more likely this virus doesn't go away at all, and we're still stuck in our homes for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that I can't say with certainty. The bottom line is, do you feel we're getting better or we're getting worse? And I'm not sure we can use current numbers to know that, because this is such a highly unusual situation.
Yeah, my message to my audience has simply been, I don't care what state you vote in. I don't care what the polls say. I don't care what the past tells us about what happens when the economy is bad, improving, whatever. We just really don't know. And if you care about removing Donald Trump, just make sure that you vote and get 10 other people to vote, however you can do it, because it's just so unpredictable.
Well, that's right. Now, and any time an election is going to be close, that kind of GOTV can really matter.
Right.
If Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they came down to a handful of votes. One campaign is doing a little bit better than the other.
Yep.
That changes the whole election. Now, if we're in a situation where the country has really decided this Trump thing did not work, that was a bad idea, it has failed in a multitude of ways, and Biden's up by 7 points or whatever, getting 5 more of your friends doesn't matter. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you should take a nap on election day, but I think Super Tuesday is relevant here. I mean, and I talked about this in a Politico article today. Super Tuesday was this fantastic real-time poli-sci experiment. What's more important? Is it paid media? Who owns the airwaves? Is it ground game, which is often fueled by a lot of online organizing these days? Or is it free media? Michael Bloomberg owned pay media. He just crushed paid media up and down. He flooded the airwaves. Bernie had the ground game. He had the online. He had the door knocking. He had the small donor army. He had all that stuff. Biden was broke. Biden had no field offices. There were states he didn't even visit. But his free media from Saturday to Tuesday was as golden as it's ever been. And it wasn't just that it was good. It was communicating a message that Democrats wanted to hear. Who is electable, who's going to govern in a sound and sane way, who's going to unify the party. That all came together in that 72-hour period, and he won going away.
With some endorsements in that period as well.
But it's not like Pete Buttigieg. I mean, most endorsements don't matter.
Right.
Al Gore did not save Howard Dean.
Correct.
The endorsements communicated a message.
Yeah, it was a very narrow scenario where they actually made a difference.
Yes, because it's not like Pete Buttigieg had that many votes to give, or Klobuchar had that many votes to give, or Beto O'Rourke had that many votes to give. But there were people from different slices of the party, although generally on the moderate side of things, saying, "Hey, if you're not on for revolution, if you want a more moderate, pragmatic choice who can unify the party of the country, you have one option, and it's not Michael Bloomberg, it's not me, Pete, it's not me, Amy, it's this guy." And there were enough Democrats who liked that message to consolidate around him without the benefit of a strong campaign apparatus. So if the message in November is Trump is doing a terrible job and Biden is a sane, competent alternative, you're not going to need massive digital operations or fantastic advertising to win the election. It's just going to be baked in the fundamental dynamics of the electorate.
Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine, contributor to RealClearPolitics. We'll link to his latest article that he referred to. Bill, always a pleasure having you on.
Good to talk to you as well. Take care.